Rural Legislative Advocacy Project by Mark Scott Fears. This is an overview of the policy and action plan for change. What we're looking at is the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law on July 26, 1990 by President George H.W. Bush. The ADA is one of America's most comprehensive pieces of civil rights legislation that prohibits discrimination and guarantees that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else to participate in the mainstream of American life, to enjoy employment opportunities, to purchase goods and services, and to participate in state and local government programs and services. Modeled after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the ADA is an equal opportunity law for people with disabilities. The ADA was revised by the ADA Amendments Act of 2008, which became effective on January 1, 2009. Title III prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in the activities of places of public accommodations, businesses that are generally open to the public and that fall into one of 12 categories listed in the ADA. It requires newly constructed or altered places of public accommodation, as well as commercial facilities, privately owned, non-residential facilities such as factories, warehouses, or office buildings, to comply with the ADA standards. Currently, the ADA only addresses the needs of the disabled in relation to public accommodations, which include such locations as hotels and motels, retail stores, and medical facilities. While these are necessary accommodations for the disabled, it is proposed that the addition of provisions that would deny discrimination against those with disabilities who are attempting to secure permanent housing are just as necessary. Proposed revisions to ADA. Add definitive language to the Americans with Disabilities Act to establish housing rights to those with disabilities, both physical and mental, so they are not discriminated against. This is especially applicable to those with severe mental illness, as their previous histories can make obtaining housing difficult. Simplify existing Section 8 and HUD programs for ease of use for those with mental disabilities. Target population. While the ADA is currently written does prevent discrimination in homeless shelters, it does not secure non-discrimination rights in permanent housing. Therefore, the target population that will benefit most from this change in legislation are the homeless population. This is especially true of those suffering with severe mental illness. Persons with severe mental illness and other disabilities who are not guaranteed any rights in regard to housing often find themselves in a cycle of homelessness because landlords and property management companies refuse to rent to them. This is part of the reason why I chose this specific piece of legislation. In the current program I'm working in now in my field placement, I work with people who have severe mental illness. And while we try to remove them from personal care homes and integrate them back into the community as they make progression in personal needs, one of the things that we often have trouble with is being able to find places that will rent to people that have severe mental illness. This not only causes a problem for individual, but it further causes considerable cost to the public. A 2-year study conducted by the Kent School of Social Work at the University of Louisville showed that it cost nearly $89 million over a 2-year period to shelter and care for just over 7,000 single homeless adults. The study also showed that providing permanent housing to these individuals over the 2-year period would have saved $6.4 million. This study and others like it demonstrates that providing permanent, supportive housing is the best and most cost-effective way to solve homelessness. Without protections guaranteed by changes to the Americans with Disabilities Act, this population will continue to experience significant obstacles to securing permanent housing, especially those suffering from mental illness. As we can see from these statistics, not only are the already disadvantaged homeless caused to continue in their cycle of homelessness, but the taxpayers are picking up the bill for needed shelters and additional care that will be needed to assist these people. While permanent housing will not alleviate all of the cost associated with homelessness, there can be a significant savings seen if permanent housing rights for the disabled can be secured. Perspectives. I have seen through my field practicum that persons who are suffering from severe mental illness and are currently homeless while transitioning from permanent care homes or having been homeless previously by choice have significant hardships when attempting to obtain permanent housing. As I said before in the previous slide, it is very disheartening uh, as a person who tries to help these people who have severe mental illnesses to obtain housing and the discrimination they face. This is why this piece of legislation needs to either be revised or changed so they too will have the rights to live in permanent homes. While there are some laws to assist the homeless, such as the McKinney-Vento Act and the Homeless Bill of Rights, which has only been passed in 3 states, these laws are already limited in regards to permanent housing. Perspectives continued. The McKinney-Vento Act does include the Shelter Plus Care program, which provides housing assistance to homeless persons with disabilities, mental illness, AIDS, and drug or alcohol addiction. However, the Shelter Plus Care program does not protect against discrimination in seeking permanent housing for the homeless. Currently, there is no statute to protect against discrimination in securing permanent housing. Given that recent surveys show that 20 to 25% of the homeless population in the United States suffers from some form of severe mental illness, there is a great likelihood that those suffering from these debilitating illnesses will be discriminated against. And again, just reiterated, the significance of what we're seeing here as a problem. This has been ongoing and continues to happen even today, and this is why it is so important to advocate for those who are suffering from debilitating illnesses such as mental illness and other forms of mental illnesses. Legislative advocacy. Legislative advocacy is essential to passing the proposed changes to the ADA Title III. The advocacy plan for this proposed change will include contact with all the appropriate elected congressmen for this area. Letter writing along with signed petitions will be key strategies in the advocacy plan. Follow-up calls and emails at predetermined intervals should be implemented when appropriate. So here I have some of the senators and legislators that we can contact in this area to move this piece of legislation forward. We've got noted here U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell, U.S. Senator Rand Paul, and U.S. Representative Ed Whitfield. Agency advocacy. An integral part that my agency can play in advocacy for the addition of housing rights under the ADA is educating the public in the need for this change. Education and the involvement of the local community will increase the likelihood of success in advocacy. Potential landlords should be educated on the benefits and educated on the myths of providing housing for those who have struggled with homelessness. In addition of reaching out to rental sources, local lending institutions should also be sought out for the support and assistance in relation to changes to simplify the processes for completing Section 8 and HUD housing program applications and forms. Media coverage. Media coverage of this proposed change to the ADA can be made through local radio and television stations and print news media. This will assist in educating the public about this issue. Social media will also be used to advocate for this change in policy. Given the popularity of social media, major gains can be made for proposed change to the ADA through education and links to their elected officials so that interested persons can contact their elected officials directly. Conclusion. It is especially important in rural areas that social workers advocate for people in their communities. In the community that I serve, there are many who are suffering from severe mental illness that are struggling to find permanent housing. Changes to the Americans with Disabilities Act would ensure that those with disabilities are not discriminated against when trying to obtain housing. This can be a huge step in their treatment and quality of life. Through legislative and agency advocacy, these changes can be made possible. On a final note, I just want to share some experiences that I have had with clients here recently at my place of practicum. Um, it just has become a sad thing for me because there are those who realize the importance of permanent housing and the security that it gives them, um, particularly when places that we are able to find at this point are in areas where the crime is high. Uh, the places are dilapidated, and it is just a place that you wouldn't want to put anybody. These are the kind of areas of what I am focused on here because I really truly believe that people who have the ability to care for themselves with assistance or whatever the case may be have a right to have a house to go to that has functional utilities and all the necessities they need in life and to be able to feel security. So with that, I conclude this PowerPoint and appreciate your time.